مرحبا جميعا، أهلا وسهلا فيكم مرة جديدة بجلسة مع الكتلة. استثنائيا اليوم جلسة مع الكتلة رح تكون باللغة الإنجليزية. Good evening everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this special talk with the National Bloc. Today's talk is going to be exceptionally in the English language, given that our special guests are not Arabic speakers. I'm happy to welcome today to this special talk Mr. William Bourdon, the lawyer in Paris representing the plaintiffs in the French proceeding against the central bank governor, and also on the floor with me his partner, Miss Amelie Lefebvre. Welcome to this special talk with the National Bloc. I think this is a very important topic that, and the audience will have a lot of questions on what's truly going on. I'm going to start, Mr. William, with the first question. So you told the AFP one day or another he will be arrested. Despite an Interpol arrest warrant being issued for Lebanon's central bank governor, the Lebanese judiciary has imposed a travel ban on him. Do you still stand by your earlier statement? And I would like to ask you to use the microphone on your side whenever you are talking, especially since we have people watching the panel online as well.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Except if Riad Salame choose to consider that the villa where he is definitive and endless golden retreat. Yes, as soon as he fly outside, he will be arrested. But of course, there is another way. He can at any moment give a mandate to his lawyer to negotiate his appearance in France, certainly with a pledge, kind of promise, he will answer to all the questions of the judge. They suppose, of course, that those here in Beirut who decided to protect him as a kind of friendly hostage by issuing a banning order to
travel ban.
This cannot be endless, and one day or another he will retrieve his capacity to fly to France and to be indicted by the judge. Of course, he can also choose another legal avenue, that is to say, plead guilty. Very few suspect of laundering money and corruption have decided for the moment to enter this legal avenue of plea guilty. Most of them have chosen cynically to continue a strategy of complete denial or victimization, paradoxically accusing the judge of politicization, forgetting that themselves have politicized, have privatized the state at their own benefits. So he can enter in a plea guilty. The French law gives him this capacity, which suppose that he renounce to all the assets which have been frozen. And, it is his choice. So if the travel ban is lifted, we hope that he will take the good decision to appear face to the judge, to explain himself, to answer to all the questions, and perhaps to plead guilty. It's not our decision, it's his personal decision.
I have another question before we move on with the rest of the discussion. And I think this is a personal question that I can't overlook, and many people around the country and here are asking it. Why is a French national so invested in the case against Lebanon's central bank governor? And I think this is a question for both of you.
Let's say that I'm not obsessed. So I will answer, and Amelie will precise. We are not obsessed to target Riad Salame. 3 years ago, some people came to me and say, why you do not duplicate what you did against 3 African head of states, their clan and their complice, which brought 2 investigative judges to indict many individuals, among them Bongo family, Sassou Nguesso family, and at the end, definitive sentence against Teodoro Obiang, the son of the despot, which has been ruling for 35 years, Equatorial Guinea. He has been definitively convicted. It appears to me clearly that something has to be done. So we decided to draft the first complaint. After many steps, it's brought to the 2 indictments by the French investigative judge and the warrant against Salame. Why Salame? Because we were able to documentate the complaint based on open source and some reports issued by anti-corruption NGO among the world, investigative journalists. And it was not so difficult to documentate the first complaint. And then we have been helped by some whistleblowers and some anonymous individual who share with us, and thanks to them, some information, and we encourage them to continue the job. Before giving the floor to my partner, this is an opportunity to say that we hope that the Salame chapter will be closed quickly. And we do think that the wish of the judge is to terminate the case not too long. Perhaps to terminate the investigation at the end of the year, at the best, and at the best, a trial next year. It would be very important to have a first trial, and without an excess of confidence, we do think that he will be convicted in absentia or not. Even if he's still in Lebanon, he can be convicted. Our duty, our wish, is to continue to develop and documentate other criminal complaints against other main kleptocrats here in Lebanon. We have to be very ecumenist, not to forget the others. And time plays against them, and there is an incredible and unprecedented intensity of collaboration between various European judges. You have seen that with the visit here in Beirut. There is a special squad of police officers dedicated to the inquiries against Salame. It would be counterproductive to make any announcements. And of course, we are not going to make any kind of name dropping. The one here who have to fear the fire of the European judge will recognize themselves very easily. So it saved me to make any kind of name dropping.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think William has said most of it, but to come back to the core of your question, or what I understand is underlying your question, what drives us is this intimate belief we have that wrongs have to be made to right, and that as lawyers we have a duty to defend these rights when we are asked to do so. We share this common belief that, and this common feeling that when people are suffering directly from embezzlement and fraud for skyrocketing amounts. The outrageousness of the situation commands us to take action at our level. The judiciary procedure is not a solution to everything. It will not be the key to a transition in Lebanon, which calls for many other actions. But it is, we hope, an instrument for this transition. And it is because we are contacted by people who share this belief, who bring information to us, who have some whistleblowers who today are sick, for some of them, for having themselves participated to a system that has allowed this. It is because of this, the converging of all these elements that suddenly, I would say, stars are aligned, a door is open, and this is where we have a duty to take action, look at the elements, study the facts, study the law, draft a complaint, and carry it for the associations that we represent before a French judge. All the more when we are in a situation in which the state, the Lebanese state here, is in complete failure, and that we know for a fact that Lebanese people here do not, even if they are willing, even if they have the expertise, even if they would have the resources, which is not the case today, they do not have the proper institutions that would address these cases and these frauds.
Thank you so much for both of your answers. I will move on. You explained now that you have gathered the files and all the data that you have. I think it's clear to everyone that the Forry scheme is, which is very complex financially, is a big part of the investigation and the complaint all in all. But many people who have tried to read all the articles that have been published, whether in local media, whether in Arab and foreign media, don't always understand what the Forry scheme is. So is there any chance that you could try to explain to us in simple terms what are the alleged wrongdoings and basically what is the Forry scheme in particular?
Okay, I will make a very short synthesis and as simplified as I can, because it is indeed a very complex scheme. The Forry scheme is the mechanism that was put in place by the Salame brothers, mainly, not only, for their own profit, to divert public funds from the central bank to this company, of which Raja Salameh was a beneficiary. To make it to go a bit more into detail, but I'll try to remain simple again. The central bank will put on the market a certain number of financial instruments, financial investments that any depositor in Lebanon can say, oh, I want to buy this investment product. Forry was presented as an intermediary who would help in these transactions, and for this service was supposed to receive a commission. This is a simple market situation, except that this intermediary service was completely, did not exist, was never rendered. Forry is a perfectly empty shell. There are no employees, there are no offices. There is only one bank account in the name of Raja Salameh, and well, there are several accounts, but the main account was in his name, and he was the only one taking money out to redistribute to the governor and some of members of their family. And this is why this this system could not continue. And it has enabled, precisely because this is out of reach of people's understanding, unless they have a very technical, financial expertise, knowledge, unless they have access to specific documents. Some of them were forged. Of course, all of this has been disguised under piles and piles of documents and paperwork. So it was extremely difficult to detect this. And now that the veil has been lifted, it is only now that we discover the widespread implication of so many public servants who were supposed to detect this and who voluntarily have closed their eyes on these transactions.
Perhaps,
Go ahead.
it's very important to add that in all these main criminal scandals, all these prominent international thugs have been able to achieve the crime with the assistance of auditors, bankers, jurists, lawyers, notaries. And all those should not escape. And we can expect that in Salameh case or other cases, or in France or in Germany, some auditors, some jurists, some bankers, already Marwan Khaireddine has been indicted, and some others will be indicted. It's important for Lebanese to keep in mind that beyond this juridical assistance, there is a responsibility of some, what I call engineer of figure on law, because if they do not exist, if they do not provide their competence and their expertise, it would not have been possible for all these guys to commit all these crimes. So it's also a European responsibility to make accountable all these guys, notaries, lawyers, jurists, bankers, who assist legally in the commission of the crimes, Salameh and all the other kleptocrats.
This was an opening remark actually for my follow-up question, and you kind of introduced it. It appears that a number of key figures are involved, including some who have already been questioned here or in France, most notably individuals close to the governor and a number of other bankers. My other question was going to be on specific, to what extent are these individuals involved, especially the bankers and the heads of banks? And can we elaborate more on what is the situation of banker Marwan Khaireddine, because he was subjected to a questioning and then he returned back to Lebanon, as far as we know.
The fact that he returned is not a big deal. He has been authorized by the church. I understand the focus on this because it has been perceived as a surprise, but it's not a big deal. The main thing is to underline the energy with which the French judge have acted since the beginning. What they did was quite quickly. Some indictment came up in a quite quick schedule. We do not receive, of course, the intention of the judge. We have to visit them. They talk to us or not. They understand that the case is very touchy. So, but we can expect this good sense to say that in the Salameh case there will be other indictment and perhaps other international warrants in the next months before the end of the year. We don't know, but the trial of Salameh will have only credibility if all the complices, all the guys, all the family members who have committed who are suspected to have committed crimes at the request of Salameh and at their own benefice, will be also brought to court to make them accountable.
Do you have anything to add on this matter as well?
Yeah, I think just to add one precision, we understand, and since we have arrived in Lebanon, this is something that we have felt more than ever, that there are many expectations on this procedure, and that we are all aware that many more individuals have to be held accountable before the justice. Again, this procedure in France has been exceptional in many ways. It has been extremely fast. A very strong team of investigators have been dedicated to the case. We know that human resources have been specially allocated to the case. And it will be, as William said, a first chapter. It's only a first step. There is an arbitrage to be made between satisfying the expectations that all the accountabilities be held in this first chapter and efficiency. A first sentencing serves the possibility to hold others accountable. It is not contradictory. This is why our position is that it is a good thing that this investigation has been focusing on the strongest evidence they have at a rapid pace, and we hope and we wish that the judges manage to pursue their investigations, close this case rapidly, which we know will be extremely strong, so that we can already hold a first trial and a first of a long series, we hope.
Of a long series of other personnel, that's what you mean, right? Okay. And here comes my follow-up question, which I think you also shortly tapped on, which is the trial. So several judicial sources have suggested that Lebanon would not extradite Salameh, but instead would try to transfer the case to Lebanon and hold Salameh's trial here. Given the French and Lebanese common work, would this be possible, or would the French judiciary accept such a measure, or no, the trial is going to be happening in France?
So to answer that question, we are aware of the attempts, and we have no doubts that everything and all the efforts will be deployed to try to hold the system that is protecting Riad Salame to the end and as long as possible. This has no impact on the French procedure. The offenses that are prosecuted in France and for which indictments have already been taken are perfectly autonomous. They cannot be repatriated to Lebanon. The French judge has a jurisdiction because cash has transited through the French accounts and investments have been done on the French territory, and that gives a full and sovereign jurisdiction to the French judge. And this is what has been investigated, and this is what they're focusing on. The Lebanese authorities can decide to protect Riad Salame and never extradite him. This equals it's like dancing the fandango. It's really indifferent for the French judges whether he appears or not. And again, as William said, he can appear. And the French judges have given him repeatedly the opportunity to come and to explain himself. And the situation that we are witnessing today, in which he has not appeared, is, again, we have no doubts, is solely his choice. The travel ban is a fictitious one, and we know that it will also be his choice if this travel ban is one day lifted.
Okay, let's add that in the Teodoro Obiang case, his lawyers before the French court have provided a decision by which Teodoro Obiang has been acquitted by Malabo court in Equatorial Guinea of all offenses. It was fake, it was bullshit. And the French judge didn't give a damn and reject his decision. So if one day Salame is acquitted here after a kind of fictitious proceeding, it will have no impact on the French proceeding. And if he is, at contrary, convicted for the offense committed here in Lebanon, this will not put an end to all the European proceedings which will go until their termination. So this is to squash propaganda which is diffused by Salame mandators and lawyers who prefer to disseminate alternative truths than to respect the fact and the law.
Thank you. I have a couple of more questions, and I'm going to try to make it short because I know that the audience has a significant number of questions as well. There are several other countries, in particular European countries, who are also involved in the trials or who have also claims against the governor as well. So can you try to explain to us how does this European framework work? We have the French trial going on. Is there other trials happening elsewhere in Europe, or is it all under one file that is being cooperated between several European judges? Because there is also a dilemma on this topic as well.
Well, in the same way that the French judges have jurisdiction on the ground that apartments have been bought and seized in France, all the other countries where the Salame family has decided over the last decades to invest, to place money, whether bank accounts, whether companies, whether real estate, all these countries now have jurisdiction because the money has been laundered on their territory. The second point that one must bear in mind is that there is, thanks to Eurojust, the European agency, a very strong and unique cooperation that has been permitted for this case, that has been very fruitful, especially with the seizing, coordinated seizing measures. It doesn't mean that the procedures are tied to one another to the end. If a country, for political, administrative, or legal reason, does not go to the end of its prosecution, it does not mean that all the other European judges have to renounce to their own investigations. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, I think to a big extent of it. Go ahead.
Perhaps there are two countries who need to be designated, obviously, too shy, and this is an euphemism. Swiss and UK, they go too slow. The freezing order in England has been issued only at the request of the French judge, not at the initiative of UK authorities. And it's a shame on these two countries. They go too slow. And of course, Swiss exposed that they have issues. Some assets of Salame have been frozen, blah, blah, blah. But it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. Everybody knows that the figures are extremely bigger. And we have to continue with all the European civil society to put the pressure on them, to put shame on them, to be at the level of their pledge, at the level of the international convention they have signed, and of course there is a common reasons between the city, London, and Swiss, which do not need to be explained, which are not justification, but which explain a kind of reluctancy to act as toughly as they should do it against all the oligarchs, Lebanese oligarchs, but also Russian oligarchs. It's not sufficient. Swiss and UK are in late.
I have two more questions before I wrap up my own questions. So we've seen that the seized. First, my first question is, what is the total amount that is estimated that has been laundered through Forry? Is it 300 million? Is that the accurate? 330 million. And this opens up to my next question. Given the fact of the collapsed banking system in Lebanon and all the assets of the Lebanese people that have been lost over the decades, there seems to be a link between the two cases. Some people believe that Salame is being trialed over that rather than just solely on the Forry case and the money laundered through there. My other question is, could this be a door for the bigger banking scandal, or the two cases are completely separate? I mean, does this case on Forry and the Salame brothers in particular open the door for the whole issue of the entire banking system and this banking oligarchy that you have discussed?
So to answer your first question, the Salame case is not it's not the case, and it will never be the case of the prosecution against the central bank as a whole, as an institution. It's a prosecution against a number of individuals who had a public mandate or not, and who have embezzled these public funds and who have frauded the system. So the prosecution in France is not the place where the Lebanese people will be able to intervene and have and obtain damages directly for what they have suffered from the collapse of the banking sector. The procedures that depositors can look at are completely different. They can be civil, for the most, and they can also be criminal in a certain way, when there is the demonstration that the prejudice they have suffered is the result from the cash that has transited out of Lebanon to banks, to the subsidiary banks across Europe, and for which the subsidiary banks across Europe, subsidiary banks in France, for example, must be held accountable because they are operating on the French territory and they are accountable under French law. It is a completely different reasoning, it is a completely different argumentation, it is a completely different avenue, but we believe it is as possible as the prosecution against the governor of the central bank, and we have already, at the law firm, taken some initiatives on this question.
Yeah, so we have lodged a criminal complaint for two Lebanon depositors against X, but in fact, the bank which is targeted is OD for complicity of organization of fraudulous insolvency. It was our idea that to demonstrate that these two depositors have suffered of a direct personal damage because of the way in which billions and billions have been transferred from the headquarters in Lebanon, in Beirut, to the subsidiaries in Paris. This is a very complex issue. It's in the hands of the French prosecutor for the moment, who do not decide, as far as I know, to open investigation. We will see what will be his decision. And we have to make an effort of imagination and to be also offensive. It makes sense to consider that the way in which millions of Lebanon depositors have been victims of a kind of organized crook with a complicity between public civil servant and private banks system should be accountable one day. And the sooner will be the better. And we have some reasonable reasons to consider that the way in which these billions have been transferred and impoverish all the depositors here in the accounts of the subsidiaries could make realistic to sue the subsidiaries and their management and perhaps the headquarters for complicity of laundering. This is a legal avenue. This is in development, and we will see what's going on. But we don't want to make any kind of pledge. It's a huge responsibility on our weak shoulders, and we need to be as professional as possible. We do not want to be sellers of dreams. We want to be realistic in what we do and what we pronounce.
Okay, those are my questions. I think the audience quite has a lot of other questions as well, so I try to keep my questions short and straight to the point. I think they're going live on TV, so we'll continue asking the questions. تفضل.
As the Lebanese, we see ourselves taking hostage and victims. I know you're working legally on a case government. Is there an avenue where you can take to go to the political parties that they were protecting the governor? By one example, that there had been an auditing firm working on what had happened with banks and this report never had been published. So I don't know if you, in Europe, you can have access legally on this report. Second, there have been transfers in billions from entities in Lebanon to Europe, which have been from our side, we say that this has been smuggled from the investors, that they've been putting their money in the banks and disappeared. So is there a way, I understood from the lady that it's a different issue and we have to take it through the subsidiaries of the banks, but I think also we have auditors that they've been working with the governor for tens of years, David and Touch. Then we have another auditor that has worked also on the legal case, all of it. So just thank you.
First, I have to say that it's a pity that all these criminal proceedings have been possible only because of the initiative taken by NGO. It's a pity. All these illicit flows, of course, were more or less secret, but certainly were absolutely well known by some European administration, whom the duty precisely is to open cases when we have the knowledge of the presumption of illicity of the flow. So it's a pity. And things are changing. The French judge worked very actively with much dynamism. But you cannot demand to NGO to take all the responsibility to handle the complexity of so complex, enormous, huge case, which are the consequences of the state capture here organized by the mafia, the Lebanon mafia. So it's our duty also to ask to the European prosecutor in all the countries to take some initiative to open cases when they have knowledge of some illicit flows on the European banking systems. They have been too shy. They should have acted spontaneously, directly, and again, we hope that all what we did will be a leverage for the opening of new cases in various European countries.
I have one more question before we move to the rest of the questions of the audience. So we've seen the arrest warrant that was issued for the governor, and you have described how well it's the Salame brothers case. It's not just one of the Salame guys. The other one is as involved as the first. So could we expect another indictment and another arrest warrant for the sibling very soon, or we're not sure?
Well, it would not make sense that the brothers now be separated when they have worked hand in hand for so many years to manage this scheme for their own profit. So, of course, as lawyers of the civil parties, we expect that another indictment be soon pronounced against the brother, and not only, again, as William said, auditors, intermediaries, lawyers, notaries. There is an entire little army behind them that have helped them. So they are symbolically those who have were sitting on top of the pyramid. So we are expecting, of course, the indictment of Raja Salameh. It goes without saying. It would really not make sense that this case be closed before such an indictment be pronounced by the judges, but also other indictments of these intermediaries.
Thank you. I will take more questions. Go ahead.
Alors qu'on sait très bien que cet État libanais de côté en train de protéger M. Salameh. Alors il participe à quel type? Est-ce qu'il se considère victime? Est-ce que cet État n'a pas été partenaire essentiel avec M. Salameh pour ce bon psyché qui a lieu et qui a provoqué cette... Je comprends. Est-ce qu'ils ont une chance d'être... Est-ce qu'ils ont une qualité de se porter comme partie plaignante, de se joindre à vous dans ce procès?
Of course, it's a good thing that Mrs. Iskander won his battle. She's very courageous. We had the chance to meet her and obtain a green light to structure the legal appearance of Lebanon state. But it's not the end of the story. There is a new mechanism which has been passed and endorsed by the French Parliament in August 2021. I'm more or less at the origin of this because it came up from from the conviction I share with many people that it was absolutely impossible to, after an ultimate and definitive decision of confiscation of the assets, for the moment it's provisory, so it needs to be confirmed by tribunal. It doesn't make sense to send back to a state with which to a state the product of the crime. It's exactly, you know, we all of them has been at the origin of the conviction of Rifat al-Assad, which we has been convicted 4 years jail for laundering money. If Syria state had decided to appear as a civil part, of course, that doesn't make sense. Send back the assets frozen to Damas would exactly be the same than send back to someone who committed an hold-up to say, "Oh, apologies, we give you back what you have stolen in the bank." So this mechanism in France prevents of such a risk. And if French administration through Foreign Affairs Minister have some reasons at the end of the story of this chapter to doubt of the sincerity, of the integrity of the Lebanon state, to use all these assets in respect of the public interest of Lebanese people, these assets would not be sent back and would not be transferred to the Lebanese public treasuries, but will be provided through the control of French administration with the contribution of civil society, will be provided to some Lebanese or international NGO operating here on the ground in complete and full respect of Lebanese public interest.
So to wrap it up in a clearer way, the frozen assets would not be returned to the Lebanese state. If they were to be returned for the benefit of Lebanon, that would be through international third parties and non-governmental organizations. Is that what you're trying to say?
But the restitution of the assets seized and confiscated first only after definitive sentencing in France can be returned to the Lebanese state. It's not that it will not be. We cannot say today what will be the situation when this question will arise, when the definitive sentencing will intervene or will be rendered. But if at that moment, at the moment the effective restitution of the assets will be put on the table, if at that moment the Lebanese state has not managed fully its transition, has not managed to put in place and set in place the mechanisms that ensure a control of what is happening and counterpower and a public scrutiny and full transparency and accountability of what has been done with the money, then the French law provides that the money shall not, in that situation, be restituted to the state, but that it shall be distributed to NGOs who are able locally on the ground to present projects for the development, for education, for healthcare, directly for projects of public interest, and NGOs who have the capacity to show that, contrary to the Lebanese state, they can provide guarantees with regards to transparency, to accountability, and to traceability of how each euro has been spent.
Okay, that is very clear. I'll take more questions.
Sorry, who can guarantee what you are saying now?
Normally, the Lebanese state, if the Lebanese state is claiming that it is able to manage these funds in the interest of the public interest in Lebanon, And if the Lebanese state fails to do that, then associations here, civil society organizations who are working on the ground for development projects can present these guarantees, can say, well, internally we have, if I give you a very concrete example, it has not been yet effective, this law. It's quite new. It's only from 2021. But we can imagine a civil society organization here saying, well, we have a long experience in promoting education for all the children, and we have a project to finance 120 schools, to recruit professors, to build a new classroom, to provide computers for the students. This is the budget. This is how we will work. These are the suppliers we are considering. These are the mechanisms for the control and the traceability that we can provide. These are the expertise that we have. These types of projects, in our opinion, should be eligible to say, this is the budget we would need for our project, and that such budget be taken from the assets that have been seized.
If the Lebanese state is incapable of handling the states at the
Because
time,
this is normally the job of the Lebanese state.
If Putin administration asked for the transfer of all the assets frozen belonging to Russian oligarchs, what do you think should be the attitude of Europe? Of course, to refuse. It would be the same. If Lebanon state doesn't show, then does not demonstrate in the way in which Amelie presented his capacity to use all these assets in transparency, in integrity, and in respect of the Lebanon public interest, it will not be transferred to Lebanon state.
Muhammad.
Someone with a diplomatic position or with a political position, Lebanese, like a prime minister, like a parliament member, was accused by the French authorities in France. Do they have any type of impunity in France, or will they be arrested as well?
We can take a very short break and then we'll continue for like 30 seconds.
No, there is no legal position which can permit to any suspect to consider that he should be beneficiary of immunity. It doesn't exist. And in the Merida Convention, the Universal Convention of United Nations Against Corruption, it's clearly stated that no legal position should be opposed when someone is suspect to have committed main financial crimes. That's it. That's one. The only one, there will be a public debate. It's a complex debate. We are not going to enter into detail. If the suspect, for instance, is prime minister or foreign affairs minister, or there will be a debate, and certainly the lawyers will attempt to continue that they should be beneficiary of immunity. Teodoro Obiang was vice president. He was vice president. And he asked his lawyers to plead and to exhaust all possibilities of recourses to consider that as vice president, he cannot be prosecuted, and he failed.
Okay, so the rumors that Riad Salame will leave his position as a governor.
No, it doesn't make sense. This is alternative truth. This is propaganda, purely propaganda.
Go ahead.
If there's a clean political party, like the National Bloc, who wants to do something, can it sue? Can it join anything like the operation that you are doing?
No, the political party is not admissible under French law to appear as a civil part. It's clear. To a certain extent, it would be dangerous to open a Pandora box permitting to all foreign political parties to appear as civil parts. You imagine all type of manipulation which could occur. But any kind of Lebanon entity, trade union, or party may denounce, which is another thing, may denounce in the hands of French financial prosecutor some crime, suppose that they are at a minimum documented. It's one thing to denounce, to try to convince a French prosecutor to open a case and launch investigation. It's another thing to appear as a civil part, which gives you the juridical capacity to have access to the file and to claim for civil remedies at the end, at the opening of the trial.
Go ahead, Michel.
First, thanks a lot in the name of the National Fund for your presence here. It's a huge pleasure to have you, and I think it's very interesting for everyone. Two quick questions. One is, the question has been asked, I think it's a question that everyone is asking themselves as Lebanese. So, Riad Salame and people around him are being targeted now through your investigation. The banks might be targeted as well. What might happen with politicians in the sense that will Riad Salame's investigation on Riad Salame, can it target politicians as well, or would it be new investigations that might be launched now that you've set the tone kind of with this investigation and that the French and other judiciaries are much more, let's say, aware of what's going on in terms of corruption? So that's in terms of Lebanese politicians. And then the second question is, what does the work that you've been doing tell you about the state of the Lebanese judiciary, especially compared to European judiciaries? And what is the main point of blockage in terms of functioning, the proper functioning of the Lebanese judiciary?
There's been cooperation between European judge and Lebanese administration. The three Luxembourg, German, French judge came here, and they have been able to interview some witnesses and to have access more or less partially to some file. But we know that there are some resistance, there are some blockage. In the heart of the state, it's very well known that not only some magistrates, but some high civil servants, some politicians continue to protect Salameh. And they play a very dirty game, tricky, dirty game to try to protect him. When can they be accountable? It's too early to answer to this question, but to a certain extent, if you are a civil servant and you take some measures in a way to deprive and to prevent a foreign and another foreign judge to have access to the truth, to have access to a file, this could make them accountable one day. Yes, certainly. But it's too early to answer to this question.
I think Riad Salame, of course, had a lot of colleagues working with him.
We know, yeah.
And I'm sure they have a lot of knowledge about his secrets. Can you call them to get information?
There are two things. We have developed a platform.
Yes, I know.
The Alert Lebanon.
If they don't want to.
We cannot twist their arms to come forward if they have information and documents. The platform is there. We are well aware that people who...
It's the whistleblowing platform.
Whistleblowers, people who bring information are also taking risks. It's easy, and it's not easy, but it is easy for us from our law firm in Paris to just collect the information and analyze it. When somebody before that has taken sometimes a huge risk to extract this information and provide it to law firms like ours. We are not the only ones in Europe, but law firms like ours. So what we can do is only reassure on the fact that this platform, Alert Lebanon, we know is secured, is safe. The information we have received is anonymous. We can only use it if we managed to cross-cut this information with other information. So we try to verify as much as possible things that we cannot verify. We have referred to the prosecution because, of course, we are not investigators. We are only lawyers. We cannot verify everything. But as long as things seem solid enough for us and truthful, we will use them in the course of a procedure. So there is a way, but to answer very directly your question, no, we cannot take our phones, contact these people and tell them, you know, the wind is changing directions, it's now or never. I mean, this is not how we can obtain truthful information.
Somebody who hides the truth is not guilty.
The question of accountabilities is, I think, the one we addressed at the beginning of this session.
Yeah.
It is, we understand perfectly, and your question is another illustration of what we have felt since we have arrived, that there are huge expectations here in Lebanon that as many people be held accountable as possible. Some of these accountabilities must be held here in Lebanon, not only in foreign countries. And I say this perfectly aware that the judicial system now in Lebanon is failing. It echoes to another question that was asked earlier. The judges here in Lebanon, some of them we have met, we know are working in terrible conditions. Those who really want to take action are prevented, are pressured, are threatened. It is also the case of lawyers here who have tried to work. So we are aware that this is a much bigger task than this, the ongoing investigations. And once again, we hope indeed that all those who have participated, who have known, who had a duty to report, who did not report, and who have sometimes even benefited because they have received also advantages or money directly in return of their silence, that all these people also be held accountable at some point.
Thank you so much. I know the two of you had a very, very long day, so I don't want to make it much longer as well. One last question before we wrap up.
Nous, en tant que victimes, moi je fais partie des victimes de l'association. Alors nous, en tant que victimes, qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire? On doit inventer des procès contre la banque au civil pour retrouver notre argent. Qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire?
Voilà, vous
On va plus jamais nous voir un peu là pour notre argent. Toutes nos économies, c'est fini, elles vont partir en fumée. Si c'est comme ça, l'argent, que si vous récupérez l'argent de Salé et des autres éléments, vous allez les mettre pour des ONG. Mais les ONG sont aussi partie de la mafia au Liban. C'est quoi les ONG? La moitié des ONG au Liban, ça fait partie de la mafia des politiciens.
Bon, d'abord, on est tout à fait conscient de la tragédie systémique des épargnants ici. On a ouvert un certain nombre de dossiers à Paris pour des épargnants. On ne va pas rentrer dans le détail juridique, mais on a obtenu quand même pour 2 épargnants de saisir provisoirement des sommes conséquentes dans les comptes de la filiale de la Banque Audi à Paris. Bon. Mais on ne veut pas non plus être marchand de rêves et d'illusions. Mais il y a des voies, elles sont compliquées, il faut que le dossier soit très documenté, etc. Je comprends votre découragement, madame, mais ce n'est pas complètement utopique de penser qu'un jour, comme conséquence des procédures pénales qui seraient ouvertes dans de nombreux pays européens contre les filiales des banques libanaises ou contre les banques libanaises elles-mêmes en France ou dans différents pays, ça pourrait ouvrir la voie à un fonds d'indemnisation. On n'en est pas là, il y a des exemples historiques, c'est un parcours compliqué, long, peut-être avec le soutien de la communauté internationale, je ne sais pas. Encore une fois, on n'est pas des marchands d'illusions, mais c'est pas totalement impensable. Et c'est important aussi de dire, parce que de rappeler que nous, ce qu'on espère, c'est que la peur va changer un peu de camp, et que plus la peur change de camp, et toute l'histoire le montre, je l'ai vu dans des dossiers en Amérique latine, dans les poursuites que j'ai engagées contre Pinochet, pour les familles franco-chiliennes, plus la peur change de camp, plus ceux qui ont été des auxiliaires importants du système criminel peuvent à un moment donné se dire, pour sauver ma peau et celle de ma famille, il vaut mieux que je plaide coupable, il vaut mieux que je collabore et que je devienne un repenti. Donc il peut y avoir comme ça un effet de bascule, où tout d'un coup, des personnages importants ici vont faire un arbitrage, pas pour des raisons vertueuses, mais pour sauver leur peau et celle de leur famille, et donc du fait de leur confession accélère toutes les procédures, et peut-être les procédures contre les banques, avec peut-être, potentiellement, un jour la possibilité d'ouvrir un chemin vers une indemnisation.
I want to thank you so much for all your work and efforts, and thank you all for attending.